To our panelists, research instructor, research advisor, research coordinator, good evening. We are the researchers from BSN3 Weidenbach. Our research study was entitled Effectiveness of Virtual Learning in Nursing Education, a Systematic Review of Literature. Nowadays, virtual learning has become sophisticated and accessible due to the proliferation of the web and digital technology. It expanded over the past few decades, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, due to its emergence, it affected the education process globally. Face-to-face learning was switched to virtual learning in an attempt to sustain the learning process and achieve the learning goals while staying at home. Even before the start of the pandemic, virtual learning has already been practiced by nursing students to effectively enhance their clinical skills and competency. However, the characteristics of virtual learning effectiveness and quality remained understudied.
Henceforth, the purpose of this systematic review study was to identify, synthesize, and appraise evidence-based literature, journals and articles from internet databases to support the evidence that virtual learning in nursing education is effective. This study will help maintain a broader foundation of learning, assess learning strategies plan that could be adopted in nursing education, and how to cope with the challenges in virtual learning. The statement of the problem was divided into general and specific problems. Generally, the study sought to synthesize work of literature that emphasized the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education from 2016 to 2021. Specifically, the study sought to answer the following question. What are the published works of literature from 2016 to 2021 that provide evidence that virtual learning is effective? Number 2, what learning strategic plan can be proposed to support the evidence that virtual learning is effective?
For the methodology of the study, in the research design, the researchers use qualitative systematic review to achieve the objectives of the study and the purpose of synthesizing published articles on the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education. This design is a high-level overview of primary research on a specific research question that systematically assesses, selects, evaluates, and synthesizes high-quality research evidence relevant to the study. For the population and locale, this systematic review study used for literature, databases from the internet to search for articles, journals, and relevant studies regarding the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education. Hence, the population from published works of literature were nursing students who were considered the participants or focus group of the study. To measure the eligibility of the study, inclusion and exclusion criteria were delineated to identify articles related to the study.
For this study, the instrument that was used in data gathering was a documentary review wherein literature databases were the instruments used in searching on the internet to identify journals and articles that prove the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education. Moreover, this instrument was used by the researchers to obtain information from relevant documents or literature, and it focuses on meeting the eligibility criteria using a checklist, also known as the Critical Appraisal Skills Program Guidelines. In study identification, the scope of this study focused on the topic of the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education, using literature databases found on the internet. Data sources included articles that were retrieved from the databases of Google Scholar, PubMed, ProQuest, and ScienceDirect. Furthermore, the keywords used in searching were virtual learning, effectiveness, and nursing education. In study selection, the researchers identified and screened article titles and abstracts and checked for their eligibility, differences, or uncertainties in every article to select relevant research studies appropriately. Moreover, the process in each step was recorded and presented through a flowchart based on the PRISMA framework.
Figure 2 represents the result of the study wherein the systematic process of selecting published works of literature from 2016 to 2021 that are relevant to the study. Using the 4 databases, the researchers filtered the articles by year ranging from 2016 to 2021 and limited them through journals and peer-reviewed articles to search for related studies. It was collated in an Excel file to undergo screening, checking for duplicate studies and eligibility tests, to finalize the number of studies included. The 128 articles were subjected to screening and removal of duplicate articles. After reviewing the abstract of each article, 121 articles were cut down into 34 articles that were classified. Finally, checking of eligibility was undergone, in which studies that had full-text articles were read thoroughly. Overall, 16 studies were included in the review. After synthesizing, analyzing, and appraising the 16 studies included in the review, the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education was emphasized. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the implementation of virtual learning, and most medical schools used it regardless of their readiness. In this systematic review study, the researchers would propose a plan, specifically a learning strategic plan, that would establish the best way to use the virtual learning and further establish whether it can be used post-pandemic to support the evidence that virtual learning is effective. From the 16 articles that claim the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education, 46 initial codes were extracted. After data analysis and checking comparisons regarding the effectiveness of virtual learning, excerpts were classified and 6 main themes were determined, namely learning, specifically in knowledge. Number 2 is flexible learning environment. Next is accessibility. Fourth is learner satisfaction. Fifth is independent or self-centered learning. And finally, student-teacher interaction.
Through cross-referencing and continuous data gathering, the researchers produced a conclusion that virtual learning has its advantages in nursing education. The researchers summarized its advantages by identifying and extracting themes that show the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education.
Based on the conclusions drawn and the gap identified from this review, the following recommendations were advanced. First, expanding the number of references can provide a bigger data pool which can help in gauging the effectiveness of virtual learning in nursing education. Second, using similar studies as references will be helpful in consolidating data in a wider range. Third, conducting a study in qualitative approach can also be a good help in understanding the experiences of students who have undergone virtual education. Next, limiting the origin of the references to Philippines can also be a big factor in understanding the level of virtual learning in our country, which in return can be used in comparing the level of virtual learning in country with our same caliber. Last, bridging the gaps of virtual learning towards effectiveness through identifying all the barriers to form a learning strategic plan that could maintain the effectivity of learning during COVID-19 pandemic.
This ends our presentation. We are now ready for your questions.